We hear a lot about the wisdom that comes with age, but what often goes unsaid is that age can also bring a particular kind of quiet. It's a silence left by voices that used to fill your days, a silence that echoes with decades of shared laughter, and a silence that can become a heavy, almost unbearable weight when a lifelong friend is suddenly gone. This isn't just a fleeting sadness. For many seniors, it's a recurring, deeply felt loss, a grief that too often stays hidden. Picture a beautiful tapestry, woven with 60 years of memories, 60 years of inside jokes, of knowing you always had someone in your corner, and the quiet comfort of being understood, maybe better than by anyone else in the world. That was Eleanor's life with Clara, her best friend, her confidant, her sister in every way but blood. Their friendship wasn't just a part of Eleanor's life. It was a cornerstone, the very foundation on which so much of her happiness was built. And then, one ordinary Tuesday, that cornerstone crumbled. Clara was gone, leaving a hole so big it shook 82-year-old Eleanor to her core. This is her story, a story that mirrors what so many older adults go through, a story about a pain that, far too often, no one really talks about. Eleanor and Clara. They met as young women, barely in their 20s, at a community dance. Eleanor, always a bit more on the shy side, had been talked into going by her mother. Clara, bubbly and outgoing, spotted Eleanor hesitating near the refreshment table and, with that classic bright smile of hers, just marched right over and said hello. And that was the beginning. 62 years to be exact. Their lives unfolded side by side, sometimes so intertwined it was hard to tell where one began and the other ended. They navigated the bumpy roads of early adulthood together. First jobs, those early heartbreaks, the sheer thrill of new independence. They were each other's maid of honor, beaming as the other took vows promising forever. Their kids grew up together, a happy, rambunctious, extended family, tumbling through shared holidays, summer vacations at the lake, and countless backyard barbecues. Eleanor remembered all those cups of tea, and later, as their taste changed, the occasional shared glass of sherry. They'd sit at Eleanor's kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window, and just talk for hours. About everything, about nothing at all. The comfortable silences between them were just as precious as the conversations. Clara knew Eleanor's worries without her needing to say a word, and Eleanor could always make Clara laugh, even when tears weren't far away. They had their rituals. Tuesday was their phone call day, a habit they kept for nearly 50 years. Even when miles separated them for a while, when Clara's husband was transferred for work, those Tuesday calls were sacred. They had their favorite park bench, the one overlooking the rose garden where they'd meet on sunny spring afternoons. They both adored old movies, often quoting lines no one else would get, dissolving into giggles like schoolgirls. This wasn't just a friendship. It was a living, breathing archive of their lives. Clara held memories of Eleanor's parents that even Eleanor's own children never knew. Eleanor remembered the exact shade of blue of Clara's dress on the day she brought her first baby home from the hospital. They were witnesses to each other's greatest joys and anchors in each other's deepest sorrows. They'd seen each other through illnesses, the loss of their parents, the bittersweet ache of children leaving home, and later, the quiet grief of losing their spouses. Through it all, their bond remained, a constant reassuring presence. It was, Eleanor often thought, The one relationship that truly felt unshakable. A lighthouse in the sometimes stormy seas of life. Losing a friend like that wasn't just losing a person. It was losing a part of herself. A part of her history that could never be brought back. As many older adults unfortunately discover, the loss of such a close, long-term friend can lead to a real and lasting increase in depressive symptoms. It was a Tuesday. Eleanor had her cup of tea ready, a slice of lemon, just the way she liked it. She glanced at the clock. 10:05 a.m. Clara was usually so punctual. By 10:15, a little knot of unease started to tighten in Eleanor's chest. This wasn't like Clara. She dialed Clara's number. It rang and rang, but no one answered. A prickle of anxiety. She tried again 10 minutes later. Still nothing. The call came, but not from Clara. It was Clara's daughter, Susan, her voice strained, thick with tears. Eleanor knew, even before Susan managed to get the words out, that something was terribly wrong. Mom had a fall last night, Eleanor. A bad one. She didn't make it. The world just tilted. The teacup rattled in its saucer as Eleanor's hand started to shake. No, she whispered, the word, a tiny puff of disbelief. No, not Clara. There must be some mistake. But Susan's choked sobs on the other end of the line hammered home the unbearable truth. Clara. Gone. Just like that. 62 years of shared life, of Tuesdays, of knowing, of being known, all extinguished in a moment. The silence in Eleanor's sunny kitchen suddenly felt vast, cold, and utterly terrifying. That vibrant tapestry of their friendship ripped apart in an instant. The shock was like a physical blow, leaving Eleanor breathless, her mind reeling, struggling to grasp a reality where Clara simply wasn't anymore. This kind of sudden, profound loss is something many older adults face, sometimes over and over, leading to what's known as cumulative grief. The days that followed were a blur of sorrow and disbelief. The funeral felt surreal, like watching a play she never wanted to be in. Seeing Clara, so still, so unlike the vibrant woman who had danced into her life all those years ago, was an agony that settled deep in Eleanor's bones. Friends and family offered condolences. Their words were kind, of course, but somehow distant, as if they couldn't quite touch the real core of her grief. How could they understand? This was Clara. Her Clara. The true depth of the emptiness became clear in the quiet moments, in the ordinary rhythms of daily life that were now so painfully off-key. Tuesday mornings were the worst. The phone stayed silent, an unbearable reminder. Eleanor would find herself reaching for it, her fingers hovering over the numbers of Clara's name, before the devastating realization crashed down on her all over again. The empty chair at her kitchen table seemed to mock her. Who would she share her small worries with now? Who would remember that silly song they made up as teenagers? Loneliness, a feeling Eleanor had occasionally brushed up against after her husband passed, now descended with a crushing force. It was a profound, isolating loneliness that felt different, sharper. Losing her husband was devastating, of course, but losing Clara, that was like losing the narrator of her own life story. There were things only Clara knew, memories only Clara shared. She felt as if a part of her own identity had been cut away. This is something many seniors talk about, a feeling that the world has just gone quiet. The well-meaning advice from others sometimes felt like salt in an open wound. She had a long life. You have your memories. You need to stay busy. They didn't seem to get that this wasn't a grief to be quickly tidied away. It was a fundamental shift in her world. Society often seems to minimize the grief of losing a friend in old age, as if it's just an expected part of life. But expected doesn't make it any less painful. In fact, research shows that losing a close friend in a very old age can lead to a really significant increase in depressive symptoms. Eleanor found herself pulling away. Social gatherings felt hollow. The laughter of others, once a pleasant sound, now seemed to highlight her own desolation. She felt waves of guilt for being the one left behind, a common feeling among surviving friends. Sometimes a flicker of anger would surface, anger at how unfair it all was, anger that Clara had been taken from her. Her sleep became erratic. Some nights she'd lie awake for hours, replaying memories, while other nights she'd fall into a heavy, unrestful sleep, only to wake with a fresh wave of sorrow. Her appetite disappeared. The simple act of preparing a meal for one felt utterly pointless. These physical reactions are common in grieving seniors. She'd pick up a book Clara had recommended, only to put it down again, the words blurring through her tears. She'd walk past their park bench in the rose garden, now a monument to their shared past, and a fresh wave of grief would wash over her. It was the small things, the everyday things, that brought the sharpest pangs of pain. The world, once so vibrant and shared, now felt muted, its colors dulled by Clara's absence. This cumulative grief, the result of multiple losses over time, is a heavy burden for many older adults. Losing a close friend, especially later in life, isn't just about missing companionship. It's a confrontation with your own mortality and a shrinking social world. Several months after Clara's passing, autumn began to paint the town in hues of gold and crimson. It was the season they both loved, a time for crisp walks and their shared ritual of making apple pie from Eleanor's grandmother's recipe. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of old photographs, a task she'd been putting off, Eleanor came across a picture of her and Clara. They were in their late 30s, arms slung around each other, laughing, standing in front of a slightly lopsided snowman their children had just proudly built. The laughter in that photograph, so alive, so carefree, seemed to leap out at Eleanor, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence of her living room. Suddenly, the dam of composure she'd so carefully constructed just broke. A sob tore through her, raw and agonizing. She sank to the floor, the photograph clutched in her hand, and she just wept. She wept for Clara, for the future they wouldn't have, for the 60 years that now felt like a fleeting dream. She wept for the unspoken words, the shared jokes that would never be told again, and the comforting presence that was simply gone. It wasn't just sadness, it was a profound existential ache. In that moment, the finality of Clara's death, the absolute unchangeable reality of her absence, hit Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. The loneliness wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a state of being, crushing, absolutely. Who was she without Clara as her witness, her sounding board, her other half? The thought, "I am truly alone now," echoed in the hollow chamber of her grief. This was her darkest moment, a stark realization that the pain wasn't just a passing shadow, but a new, unwelcome inhabitant in the landscape of her life. She felt the full weight of what researchers describe, that losing a close friend can seriously impair emotional and social well-being, sometimes for years. The grief was complicated, a tangled knot of sorrow, fear for her own future, and the painful awareness that a unique, irreplaceable bond had been broken forever. This journey of grief and loneliness is a deeply personal one, yet it's an experience that many people share, often in silence. If Eleanor's story resonates with you, or if you walked a similar path, we invite you to share your thoughts or memories in the comments below, if you feel comfortable doing so. Sometimes simply knowing you're not alone can be a small comfort. And if you know someone who might be going through this, perhaps sharing this story could help them feel seen. The days following that emotional breaking point weren't suddenly brighter, but something had shifted within Eleanor. The raw agony began to change, slowly, into a dull, persistent ache, a constant companion rather than an overwhelming force. The battle against the crushing loneliness, though, was far from over. It was a daily, moment-by-moment struggle waged in the quiet corners of her life. She started small. Susan, Clara's daughter, would call to check in. Initially, Eleanor had found these calls difficult, a painful reminder of who wasn't calling. But she began to make an effort, asking Susan about her children and sharing a small, unimportant detail about her own day. These brief connections were like tiny pinpricks of light in the darkness. She forced herself to stick to a routine. Research suggests this can be helpful: getting dressed, making her bed, and taking short walks. Some days, even these simple tasks felt like climbing a mountain. The silence of her house remained a challenge. She tried leaving the radio on, but the cheerful chatter often felt jarring. The television offered distraction, but rarely any real solace. There were attempts to reconnect with old acquaintances, members of a book club she and Clara had once belonged to. But it wasn't the same. The shared history just wasn't there. The easy shorthand, the unspoken understanding she'd had with Clara, was irreplaceable. She felt the truth of the pain no one talks about so keenly. While others were sympathetic, they couldn't fully grasp the unique devastation of losing a 60-year friendship, a bond that had weathered more storms and celebrated more joys than many marriages. This type of grief, for someone who isn't family, often gets less social support, sometimes called disenfranchised grief. One afternoon, while tidying Clara's side of their favorite park bench, a habit she'd unconsciously adopted, she found a small, smooth stone tucked into a crevice. Clara had always loved collecting stones like that. Eleanor picked it up, its coolness a tangible link to her friend. She slipped it into her pocket. It was such a small thing, but it felt like a quiet acknowledgement, a way to keep a tiny piece of Clara with her. Honoring memories can definitely be a part of coping. There were setbacks, of course. Days when the loneliness felt just as sharp as it had in the beginning. Days when a particular song on the radio or the scent of a certain flower would trigger a fresh wave of tears. She learned that grief wasn't a straight line of getting better, but more like a landscape with peaks and valleys. She was learning to navigate this new terrain, a world forever changed by Clara's absence. The support from her family, though different from the unique companionship of her friend, became more important. She allowed herself to grieve at her own pace, without any pressure to move on quickly, which is such a crucial part of healing. Years have passed since Clara left. Eleanor is now approaching her late 80s. The sharp, stabbing pain of that initial grief has softened, but the ache of Clara's absence remains, an echo in the quiet rooms of her life. It's not a story of getting over it, because as Eleanor discovered, you don't simply get over 62 years of profound friendship. You learn to live with the space it leaves behind. Eleanor still has her routines. She still has her tea, though Tuesdays are now just Tuesdays. Sometimes she catches herself about to pick up the phone to share a piece of news, a funny observation before remembering. A wistful smile might touch her lips then, a mixture of sadness and enduring affection. She found a quiet comfort in tending her small garden, something she and Clara had often talked about doing more of one day. The feel of the earth in her hands and the satisfaction of seeing something grow offered a gentle rhythm to her days. She also started volunteering at the local library one morning a week, reading to children. Their uncomplicated joy was a balm. These activities didn't replace Clara. Nothing ever could. But they offered new quiet points of connection and meaning in her life. She keeps that small smooth stone from the park bench in a little dish on her bedside table. Sometimes she holds it, its familiar coolness a comfort. She shares stories about Clara with her grandchildren, keeping her memory alive, making sure that the remarkable woman who had been her best friend is not forgotten. These acts of remembrance are so important. Eleanor has come to understand that this profound sadness is, in its own way, a testament to the profound love and friendship they shared. The depth of the grief is a measure of the depth of the connection. She doesn't fight the sadness when it comes anymore. She allows it, acknowledging it as part of her. She has accepted that this particular loneliness, the kind that comes from losing such a significant piece of her history, may always be with her. But it no longer crushes her. She endures with a quiet strength, carrying the precious weight of 62 years of friendship in her heart. Her life is different, quieter, but it continues. And in that continuation, there is a form of peace. She knows that while the pain of losing friends in later life is immense and often unspoken, the value of those friendships is immeasurable and truly lasts forever. Many seniors, through various ways of coping, do manage to navigate these profound losses, finding a new normal, even if the sorrow remains an undercurrent. Eleanor's story is deeply personal, isn't it? Yet it speaks to an experience that's universal, particularly for older adults. The profound and often recurring grief of losing close friends. As we get older, these kinds of losses can happen more frequently, leading to what experts call cumulative grief. This isn't just about missing a companion, it's about losing shared histories, those inside jokes, and the unwavering support that a lifelong friend provides. It's a pain that society sometimes overlooks, maybe assuming that loss is just an expected part of aging. But expected or not, the emotional impact is huge, often leading to deep sadness, loneliness, anxiety, and even physical symptoms. The journey through this kind of grief is unique for every single person. There's no set timeline, no right or wrong way to feel. What's really important is acknowledging the pain, allowing yourself to grieve, and finding ways to cope. Whether that's through talking with family, honoring memories, engaging in meaningful activities, or seeking support from others. If you or someone you know is navigating the loneliness that follows the loss of a dear friend in later life, please know that these feelings are valid and you are not alone. Reach out, share your story if you feel comfortable, and seek connections. Sometimes the greatest comfort comes from just knowing that others understand. Let's start talking more about this unspoken pain, and in doing so, perhaps we can lighten the burden for those who are carrying it. Thank you for listening to Eleanor's story. If this resonated with you, please consider liking this video, subscribing for more content that delves into the real experiences of life, and share it with anyone you think might benefit from hearing it. Your engagement helps us to bring more of these important, often untold stories to light.